Good afternoon, everybody. This is Vera Cabrera from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and this is a re-record of a webinar, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because the recording did not work yesterday. And so I'm re-recording it by myself, but it will be the same content. So I'm going to share my screen, and this will give you access to the presentation. So give me just a moment to get my screens organized. I will bring the screen over here so that you can access the presentation and be able to follow along on your own if you choose to do so. Give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. And I'm going to switch to this screen. And that will give you access to the short link so that you can join the presentation if you choose to do so. And I will minimize that. So it's a short link, go.ncdpi.gov/good, bad, ugly AI, which is in camel case with the first letter of each word capitalized. That presentation will remain available. However, it may be updated and adjusted from time to time for different time spans and different audiences. So just know that. But you're welcome to refer back to it at any time. So again, my name is Vera Cabrera. I'm the Emerging Technologies Consultant for the Department of Public Instruction. And that is a new position I've been filling for a couple of months now. And I do encourage you to connect with me at any time. I am a statewide consultant, so I do serve statewide. And I'm going to double check just a minute and make sure that my recording is actually happening. So give me just a minute. I want to make sure this is going on like I think it is yesterday. Yes. Okay, so I am recording. Yesterday I thought I was and I wasn't. So learn to double check that. Okay, so going along. This is a quote that if you've seen me present before, you have probably seen anytime over about the last 10 years I've been using this quote, but it's become infinitely more relevant since the advent of ChatGPT. And so the quote is accredited to John Dewey. There's some discussion over whether or not he said this, but regardless, it is a powerful quote. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And again, that quote has never been more relevant than it is today. And that he said that in the 1920s, which was, of course, 100 years ago. And things have changed a lot in the last 100 years. And we're going to look at some of those changes. First of all, what we call knowledge workers today in the 1920s, of course, looked very different. The technology looked different, but the people also looked different, and the way that they worked together looked different. Today, knowledge workers work sometimes even collaboratively across the world and don't even see each other, but it definitely looks different than it did in the 1920s. Transportation has changed dramatically. In the 1920s, of course, was the advent of the automobile, the horseless carriage. In the 2020s, we have electric vehicles, we have hybrid vehicles, we have lots of different kinds of transportation that was not available in the 20s. This is something I've just add because I find this fascinating, but rideshare services have changed dramatically. Of course, in the early 2000s, everybody was using Uber and so forth, but now in the 2020s, there's this new autonomous ride-hailing service in San Francisco and Phoenix. It's called Waymo, and it's coming soon to Los Angeles and Austin, and I'm sure eventually to all major cities. But it is a car with no driver that you can hail to take you from place to place. Not sure I will be riding in one of those anytime soon, but it's certainly an interesting idea. This is something else I've added recently about robots, because robotics is really a field that is not getting a whole lot of attention in education right now, but there's a lot of advancements have happened in robotics as well. And in the 1920s was the first humanoid robot, which was this Herbert Televox. In 1927 shows there Ron Winsley with it. And honestly, for that robot, it was just a circuit board, and he added the human features just to for interest because people didn't pay it much attention. But just recently, there have been a lot of advancements in robotics, and I'm just going to play this video and kind of keep the sound down on it a little. But this is a company called Unitree, a Chinese company, and this is something they just released very recently, this demo, and they're mass producing this Unitree robot now. And you can see there that the capabilities, the physical capabilities, which has been one of the biggest challenges for robotics for the last 20, 30 years, it is remarkable what this robot can do. And it's not the only one. On the next slide, I have a few more examples of robots, humanoid robots, and they are becoming embodied AI. And so these robots have AI built in that helps them to function. And of course, Optimus, the Tesla company, is one that's been around for a while. And this kind of shows, I'm not going to go through all these videos because of the time, but this shows the progression of the Optimus robot, and they're coming out with an Optimus 3 very soon. And you'll see that they've really worked a lot on particularly the hands. And I've listened to a really interesting podcast with Elon Musk talking about that process. But it is an American company that has a similar robot. But I'm sorry, I skipped back accidentally. So I'll go back to the one. But also, this one is one that the Boston Dynamics is producing. This was a very recent clip also. And in this one, the robot does push-ups, which, may not seem that remarkable, but again, the capabilities, the physical capabilities have really improved. But this one, OpenAI shared this video of the Figure One robot, which is embodied, an embodied AI. In other words, it has AI built in, and I'm going to play just a little bit if you haven't seen it. It's a couple months old. I won't play the whole thing. So this was from March, but it demonstrates the speech reasoning and visual capabilities.
Hey, Figure One, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Great. Can I have something to eat?
Sure thing.
Great. Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
Great. So based on the scene right now, where do you think the dishes in front of you go next?
The dishes on the table, like that plate and cup, are likely to go into the drying rack next.
Great. Can you put them there?
And I'm not going to play the whole video, but that's enough to demonstrate the reasoning capabilities combined with the body of the robot. And notice also the dexterity in the fingers that is drastically improved. And so all of that just kind of demonstrates where robotics is going with the infusion of AI. And so it is, for some people, very scary, gives you kind of Terminator vibes, but it is a reality that we need to know about. People in education need to understand what is happening out there and what the future holds. And so I wanted to demonstrate that, but I have a few more 20s to now. Socialization for our children, of course, nobody needs to be told that our children are socializing much differently today than they were in the 1920s. And I think most people would argue perhaps not better, but it's a reality that our students are connected to their devices. They are socializing most of the time instead of with the people around them. They're socializing with people that are not around them, and they're very connected to their devices. Education. If we look at education, though, it perhaps has changed less than anything else. These two, of course, these are all DALL-E 3 AI generated images, but you can see that even though the scene on the right looks more modern in its coloring and the technology in the room, Other things are very much the same. We're still seeing students sitting in rows, working individually. They're working on a computer now instead of a book a lot of times, but there's still this sage on the stage in the front that is directing them and a lot of times just pouring knowledge into them instead of letting them explore and learn on their own. And our education system has not kept up with the times. And in a lot of ways, of course, that's a general statement. We do have pockets of innovation. Some people in some classes are doing things differently, but by and large, our education system has not kept up with the technology and with the innovation that we've seen in the last 100 years. So, in continuing forward, we've seen more technology than we can imagine in the last 100 years, but looking forward to the next 100 years, a lot of futurists, including this guy, Peter Diamandis, in 1920, this quote was in McKinsey and Company's Tech Trends Reshaping the Future. And he said that we can expect to experience more progress in the next decade than the previous 100 years combined. And of course, we're already 4 years into that decade. And since 2022, the public became aware of AI and generative AI. We have already seen a remarkable amount of progress. And it's almost hard to imagine what the next 6 years, the rest of this decade, will show. But it will probably most likely be more than that previous 100 years that we just looked at. And so I created this originally on November 30th, ChatGPT's first birthday, just to kind of point out some of the highlights that impacted education in particular over that year since ChatGPT had been made public and people became aware of it. And I've continued it, just picking up the highlights again. There have been so many things happen. There's no way that one graph could represent them all, but the progress continues and it is, if anything, accelerating. Things are happening faster because every new innovation is building on the previous innovations, and it is allowing kind of a quantum leap in innovation and technology. And so I'll continue to keep that updated, but it just is a good visualization. And this is another way of visualizing this progress. The AI models, the text models, have had similar improvements, but of course, it's much harder to demonstrate. Visually, it's much easier to see the progression. But this is something that I borrowed from the Stanford Human AI Institute, where they have input the same exact prompt into Midjourney, which is an AI generation tool, starting in February of 2022 and to December of 2023. So less than 2 years, you can see the progression of the AI image generation tools and how much they've improved over that time period. And when we put that first image and that last image side by side, it shows even more drastically. So this first image right here looks very much like maybe Picasso was hired to paint that rather than it being a photorealistic image. But this last one in December of 2023, and of course, we're almost a year past that, and there's been even more progress since then. But this last image really looks realistic. This is an image that, by all means, could not really be deciphered, could not be, we couldn't tell the difference between this and an actual photograph of the character who plays that Harry Potter. And so that is where the technology is, that's how much it has improved already, and the progression is continuing. This is a little video synopsis of the last 10 years, or 10 months rather, sorry. For some reason, people were really obsessed with picture or videos of Will Smith eating spaghetti 10 months ago, but they show just how ridiculous. I mean, it was really impressive then, but it's ridiculous how bad the technology was. And then I'm going to just kind of move forward in it to show you some of the videos that are created with the technology that is available today. These are all created with Sora, which is OpenAI's video tool, all with text. So the people who created this just used a line of text and were able to generate these videos. And some of these it will show the text, some it does not. And of course, some of these are photorealistic, some of them are cartoons, some of them are fantasy. But in any case, it shows how realistic these images can be, or these videos can be. And I will just say that OpenAI has this tool ready for release, and they made the decision not to release it until after the election in 2024 because they're so concerned about their tool being used for malicious purposes in the election. However, there are other similar tools on the market now that have not been held back. China, a company in China has one called Kling, which is Kling, which can produce similar quality videos with text. And then there's another company called Runway 3. And then there are a couple others out there that have already released. So this technology is widely available and very easy to use, something that pretty much anybody can do. And so those are things that we need to be aware of. Another thing that we need to be aware of in education is the advent of conversational AI. And conversational AI is here in the current level, but I will show you also where it's going. It's going to get a lot better, a lot more humanistic, a lot more realistic, and I'll show you that soon. But first of all, I'm just going to demonstrate conversational AI that is now available on the ChatGPT app. And recently, Google Gemini also released something called Google Live, which is very similar, but it is only available for paid subscribers. But this is something that's coming to all of the major AI tools. And so if you are not using the ChatGPT app, I would say you really need to be. And there are links here where you can download it for your Android and your iPhone. And I'm going to demonstrate it because I'm on a MacBook. There's one for the MacBook as well. However, there is not one currently available for a PC, but I think that is coming. So I'm just going to minimize this screen. Okay, so here's my ChatGPT app. As you can see, it looks very similar to ChatGPT that you have seen other places. Looks just like your app, but it is, oops, I'm sorry, I'm trying to move my screens around. Forgive me for just a second. Well, I'll just have to minimize it and leave it right there. So I'm going to pull this up. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't cancel my recording. But as you can see, it looks very different or very similar to what you're used to. But the difference in the app is it has this headphones icon right here. And so when I click the headphones in just a second, it's going to launch the voice mode. And I'm just going to demonstrate it real quickly for you, and then I'll close it out and I'll explain what happened. Hey, ChatGPT. Remember I was talking to you about a webinar I was doing called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly? Well, right now I'm doing that webinar, and I would like for you to say hello to my audience and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm ChatGPT, and I'm excited to join you for this webinar. We're going to explore how AI is shaping education, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Let's dive in and make this hour insightful and fun.
And I'm going to go ahead and pause that, and I'm going to close it out so it doesn't keep talking to me. But I just want to show you first that it also saves everything that you say to it in a chat transcript. And so when I'm driving down the road, time that would otherwise be wasted, I can actually use this to help me plan webinars and speeches and things like that. And I find it to be extremely beneficial. I think I was not recording that just now, so let me try that again. I don't think my screen was sharing. So I'm going to try that one more time. I'm sorry. Trying to switch apps and things in midstream isn't working for me today very well. So I'm just going to open it one more time just so you can see it. And so I'm opening up the app. As you can see now, hopefully you're seeing it this time. And there's the transcript of what I just said. But this is how I would launch the app. And I'll do it one time just real quickly again. Hey, it's me again. I'm going to go ahead and turn you off. So say goodbye to the audience.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure joining you today. Keep exploring, learning, and making a positive impact with AI in education. Good.
So I'm going to go ahead and close this out and hopefully continue sharing my screen. And I will have to get my presentation back up. So bear with me for just a moment while I do that. I'm going to enlarge this one and get my presentation launched again, make sure I'm still sharing. And I apologize for the delay for just a moment while I get it back up. But as you could tell in that, it sounds very conversational. There are several voices to choose from. The voice that I was using there was, I've changed it a couple times. I previously was using a different voice and I decided to go with that one. But I like that one pretty well. So I'm going to actually switch to the other screen real quickly and share my presentation. And we'll continue our discussion. Sorry for the delay. I think it's worth demonstrating it, but it does take me a couple minutes to get set back up again. So I should be ready to go here in just a second. Okay, there we go. I'm going to share that screen. So you can see the presentation now. That should be the only time that I have to change. Okay, so now you can see the screen and we'll continue our discussion. I'm going to get back to the right slide as well. So we were, sorry, not make you dizzy here. We went through all of those already. Okay, and so now we're going to move forward from there. So again, I encourage you to get those apps. The links are there in the slide for you to get that. But something new, something is coming also that I don't yet have access to, and it will be a paid feature. It's coming to the Plus users by the end of the fall, they say. But in this advanced voice mode is what they're calling it. Actually, you can ask the AI to emulate human emotions. And so I'm going to play this little clip from Ethan Mollick. I won't play the whole thing, but I want you to notice what he does and how the voice, the ChatGPT is able to take on different emotions and emulate different scenarios in the little clip. So I'm going to play a little bit.
Give me a quote from Little Gidding.
Sure. Here's a quote from T.S. Eliot's Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration.
Okay, great. Can you do it in stentorian tones?
Absolutely. We shall not cease from exploration.
Excellent.
And the end...
Now do it like you're kind of laughing at a joke the whole time.
Okay, here goes. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring.
Now do it in chthonic tones.
All right, delving deep for this one. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our
Great.
exploring.
Now do it like you're a stand-up comic trying to get people to laugh.
All right, picture this. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will probably be to find out we've been looking for our glasses while they've been on our heads the whole time.
Great. Now do the quote, except you are surrounded by animated cheese, and the cheese keeps getting closer, and it's making you increasingly nervous, but you're also not sure why the cheese is animated.
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all
people to laugh.
Okay, and I'm not going to play the rest of it, but hopefully that was enough for you to see how remarkable that technology is. And it is both really exciting and a little bit frightening, in my opinion, because as we like to point out in education, AI is not human, but it's getting more human-like all the time. And we're going to talk about that a little more later on in the presentation, so I'm going to hold off on that. But notice that he was able to have it act like it's laughing, take on different tones, act like a stand-up comedian in which it even instigated some humor. It's really remarkable, and that technology will be widely available to at least Plus users by the end of the fall. Another thing that I want to demonstrate, now again, I'm not going to play the whole video because of time, but in the spring updates, OpenAI had asked Sal Khan to come in and bring his son, who pretends in this video like he doesn't understand what an isosceles triangle is, which is kind of humorous, but to demonstrate how the voice feature, the emotive voice feature, plus the vision capabilities is going to all work together and will actually allow ChatGPT to be used as a tutor. Now, in the video, he kind of sets it up at the beginning and tells it to act like a tutor, to not give the answers, but guide his son to the answers. And I'm going to skip past that part, but that's what you would do now if you're creating a tutor app or a tutor bot. you would set it up that way so that it doesn't just tell them the answers. And that's kind of what Conmigo is set up to do. But I'm just going to play a little snippet from the middle to show you how it is able to listen and correct the student who's pretending, in this case, not to know what the answer is.
OpenAI. All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember
I
the
mean,
hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done.
Okay, and I'm going to pause that because, again, that's enough for you to see what I wanted to demonstrate. And just to point out, that technology is not here yet, but it is coming soon. The voice mode that I demonstrated on the app is available, and that's available for everybody for free. And that same technology on the voice app can also be used as a live translator. And I demonstrated that in my navigating AI segment just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not going to do that today because of time, but you can use it as a live translator and ask it to translate live for you. And you can do that now on the free version as well. Okay, so looking at what we've looked at so far, we've looked back at the last 100 years and how things have changed, and we've looked at the last couple of years, how things have changed, and kind of predicted what the next few years might hold. But just to kind of ground that conversation, if you think about your kindergarten babies in school now, they're going to graduate in 2037. So knowing what we know about how things have changed in the last couple of years, it's almost hard to imagine what the world may look like in 2037, what AI technologies are going to be capable of, and what new technologies may be available. But what's certain is that they're going to need new skills to thrive in that world. And as educators, of course, that's going to be part of our job to prepare them for that future. And so I like to share this quote also from Superintendent Truitt, where she said that AI literacy is workforce development. And I couldn't agree more with that. So I like to share that. But the new hiring imperative is something I want to talk about again as education. We need to be concerned about this because in May of 2024, just a few months ago, LinkedIn and Microsoft did a big global study, and they asked people all over the world what they were looking for in their employees. And I've just pulled a couple of statistics. There are a lot more in the report, but 66% said they would not hire somebody without AI skills. And that took the wind out of my sails because I knew it's important. I knew we need to get there, but I didn't realize really that students in 2024 were already going to be at a deficit if they didn't have AI skills. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case. And 71% of the people surveyed said they would hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills over a more experienced one without them, which is also very concerning. And this is from the Teach AI report a couple years ago. And it's this just pointing out that we can't really ban AI. It's a futile effort. But if we do not allow it in schools, if we ban it in schools, we're keeping only the students who don't have access already, which is going to be our less fortunate students, our economically challenged students, our marginalized communities. Those are going to be the ones that are suffering, and they're going to be going into that job market competing for those jobs with students who have had those opportunities because they're more affluent. And that's something that we cannot let happen. That's a huge concern of mine and a huge concern kind of the whole North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And it also, this is a different report, the 2024 Educational Technology Plan, which points out where the divide is not just an access divide. Of course, we still have that, students that don't have internet and don't have technology, but there's also a divide in how our teachers are being prepared, if they're given opportunities to build their capacity. And then if our students are being prepared by giving opportunities to create and explore and engage with these tools of the trade that they're going to need to know when they graduate. And so we need to address all three of those divides. Now we're going to get into a little discussion about the good, the bad, and the ugly things that we need to know about, starting with the good. And I have four different current events here are or things to consider. Not one of them is an app, but how AI can be used for accessibility, and it has remarkable potential for helping people with different disabilities, and that's one of the greatest things. And of course, I'm not just talking about text to speech and speech to text. That's something we've been talking about for years, that we've had access to. It's not, of course, not as good as it is now, but I'm talking about life-changing, life-altering, freedom-giving applications of AI, such as this example of Congresswoman Wexton, who lost the ability to speak and was able to recreate her own voice using recordings of her own voice to regain her voice. So, and this is a speech she gave to Congress using an AI-generated AI clone of her voice, and that's a really good application. Of course, there's some bad applications of that. We'll look at that as well. This is one I do like to play just a little bit of this clip of a blind individual using Be My Eyes with AI enabled to help guide them and give them independence and freedom. And previously they used a human volunteer on the other end of the line, but that blind person then would have to share their surroundings, invite that person into their private space. And sometimes that is uncomfortable and they didn't like doing that. So soon they'll all be able to use a AI enabled version of it. And I'm going to play just a little snippet of it just so you can see how it works.
In residence at the moment.
Flying above Buckingham Palace, which is the signal that the monarch is present. How exciting to be there while the king is home.
Try and tell me exactly what they're doing right now, please.
Right now, the ducks are gently gliding across the water. They're moving in a fairly relaxed manner, not in a hurry. Occasionally, one of them will dip its head under the water, probably looking for food, and then pop back up.
I even know when a taxi is coming with its orange light on. I think I'll hail it to get home.
Okay, and I'm not going to play the whole video. That's enough for you to see the capability of it. But that's something I hope will be available soon for everybody. But I am going to play this. If you didn't see this at the Olympics, there was a paraplegic, somebody who hadn't been able to walk in 11 years, who was able to walk and carry the Olympic flame. And there's several other examples of this. I'm going to play a little snippet of it just so you can see the joy on this guy's face.
An incredible moment in technology and sports was witnessed when a paraplegic athlete carried the Olympic flame using an AI-powered robotic exoskeleton. This advanced exoskeleton.
Okay, and again, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I encourage you to watch all of those videos, though. Read the articles for your own information because they're fantastic. They're just remarkable. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I'm still recording. This thing has stopped recording on me a couple of times. The recording appears to still be going. So I'm going to keep going as well. These are some examples also of how AI has been used in medical research to help predict cancers sooner, to help predict viral infections, to analyze brain scans, prevent dementia, to create drugs for all kinds of uses. And there are many, many more. This is just a few of them. And then this is also some information about how AI is being used to help the environment, used in agriculture to help feed the people of the world as well. And a little graphic there that I've added that shows that its impact in being used to help the environment is also expected to generate up to $5 trillion US in the economy worldwide by increasing GDPs, and that's in all regions. And so hopefully some of our students, there's several good examples we've seen, some of our students could be the very ones who are coming up with these solutions to huge problems that the world has been facing for years and years and years by using AI to help them do that. But we need to be the ones that are preparing them for that, giving them the critical thinking skills and the experience to be able to do that. And now we're going to continue on looking at AI in education specifically. there are lots of good uses for AI in education as well. And personalized learning is one of my favorites. It's a great way to kind of personalize for different students of different ability levels. And I know as a teacher for 14 years, that was a very difficult part of my job because you have students of very different backgrounds and different skill levels in your room. And you really need to, and you want to, as a teacher, to make sure that you have something that is applicable and accessible to every one of them. But it was a very time consuming task. AI can really help that, make that less time consuming. It can help break down economic barriers, language barriers, social barriers. It can help provide tutoring. We've seen where the future where that's going. But even now, it can be used by a student to explain a concept they don't understand, to help them practice for a test, to quiz them on what they're learning, to help them brainstorm ideas, to give them feedback. There are lots of great ways it can be used that are not cheating. It can enhance engagement because students typically are more engaged when they're using emerging technologies. We've already looked at accessibility. The potential there is enormous. It can provide data-driven insights. It can help with language learning, as I've already said. It can be used as a live translator now with the app. And of course, it helps improve administrative efficiency. It helps people do things faster to offload tedious tasks to the AI so they can then engage with students more and learn their students and spend time with them. But it is also important to point out that we don't ever want to just be making faster worksheets or creating the same old content faster. We need to make sure that we're adapting our instruction as well to prepare students for the world they're going into. But it can really be a time saver for teachers, for sure, and for all educators. And I also just like to point out that educators, teachers, students, parents, everybody is using AI. The majority of people are using AI today. And this was a survey from May, and that was a huge increase over last year whenever we kind of saw the reverse. There were the minority of people were using it and the majority had not used it. And so it is there, it's being used. Us not adopting it is not preventing its use. And continuing on, the risk of AI are greater, the risk of ignoring AI are far greater than the risk of implementing it responsibly. But we do have to take a responsible approach. And our guidelines include this graphic, which talks about the appropriate way of using it is like an e-bike where the human maintains control always, but they can use it to reduce the struggle sometimes and result in more productive learning. But if we just turn people loose with AI without proper training, there actually are some really negative potential implications. It can be a little dangerous, like a motorcycle. But if we don't use it at all, we have a lot of students who are struggling and a lot of teachers who are struggling as well. And AI could be used to help reduce the struggle there. And so I'm going to continue on. In education, really to adapt to the age of AI, I did a whole webinar on this a couple weeks ago. I encourage you to go back and look at it, called Zero to Infinity. But we've got to start thinking about process over product. And we've got to start thinking the process of learning in a homework apocalypse like we're having now, to borrow from Ethan Mollick's words, where pretty much anything we're throwing at them they can do with AI. We have to start thinking about the process of learning instead of just that end result, that end product. And there are some ways too that you can make assignments more resistant to AI. You can't really make them AI proof because a really skilled student could find a way to get help with most anything. But if you're incorporating some of these, and I'm not going to read them all, but personal experiences, speculative elements, multimedia, online or oral discussions, live or in person, real time discussions. Those are ways that you can evaluate the learning process more. And for just one brief example, a previous example, an essay that I used to give my social studies students was just to write an essay about the causes and effects of World War II. Well, if I were in the classroom today, I would not use that anymore because I would know that my students could do that in 3 seconds with AI. And a good student could prompt the AI to make sure that I didn't know it, the AI used it by telling it to write like an average seventh grader and put in a couple of run-on sentences or something like that. And so a better example would be to say, if imagine that the Axis powers had won World War II, how would your life today be different if they had won? You have to give at least 3 examples of things you do every week, and then you have to talk about how those would be different if the Axis powers had won World War II. That's incorporating a lot of those different things, but that is also a more higher order thinking type question, which is something that's going to develop our students' critical thinking skills much better than just cause and effect essay that I would have done years ago. Again, I'm not going to discuss this a lot. I encourage you to watch the Zero to Infinity webinar for more discussion on this, but we do provide a scale, a continuum of use, and we recommend that high schools in particular and have a continuum here so that there's a clear communication between teachers and students about what level of AI use is allowed on any given assignment. And this needs to be something that's communicated, but students need opportunities to use AI in increasingly more complex ways as they go through school. And I encourage you to watch that webinar for more discussion on that. But because of time, I'm going to move on to the bad and then the ugly, and then we'll close out in a few minutes. But the bad implications of AI in education, one of the biggest concerns we have is data privacy. And this is something that since 2020, since the pandemic, has come to the forefront of most of our CTO's attention because schools have a lot of valuable data. We don't have a lot of money for security, and therefore we've become a primary target of bad actors. In fact, as schools' data are as much a target as banking institutions. And so we have to be very concerned with that. We have to educate our teachers and our students, parents, and everybody that we don't ever want to put any kind of personal identifiable information into an AI tool, because that information can then be added to the training data set and can be subject to use by bad actors. And so we need to re-educate everybody on a yearly basis what is personally identifiable information, and that it includes student ID numbers. That's something a lot of people were not aware of. We also need to re-educate everybody about our all the privacy laws, FERPA, COPPA, SIPA, HIPAA, and all of that stuff on a yearly basis. And we need to monitor that and make sure we're monitoring student engagement as well and training them what not to put in these tools. We also need to have clear policies for third-party integrations, third-party vendors, because that again, that's the number one way that people are getting student data is through third-party vendors. And so in North Carolina, we've instigated a new third-party vendor requirements, and your CTOs and your technology folks will know about those. But they're a lot more strict on that these days because they have to be. And so we need to make sure that all of our people, all of our educators know those policies, what you have to do to create student accounts, which accounts they're allowed to create and which ones they're not. And we need to make sure that that information is well communicated and taught to educators. And the educators need to make sure they're abiding by it. And just knowing that if there's an app that you want to use and you're not allowed to use it, that most likely it is because they're trying to protect that student data and student privacy, and that has to take priority over convenience or coolness or anything like that. Another bad thing about these tools is bias. And I like to just point out that they're not biased because they're created to be biased. They're biased because they're created on human content, and they are a mirror of the biases that already exist in society, because every single person in society does have biases. I'll also say that they do a lot of fine tuning with the models to try to train that bias out. And they've done a pretty good job, especially with gender and racial bias. But still, there's some inherent underlying biases that might appear sometimes, and we have to be careful to evaluate critically for that. I did a whole segment on ethics of AI, also a webinar that you can go back and watch where we go into that in more detail. But it's just something that we need to be aware of. We also always need to critically evaluate all responses. We need to make sure we teach our students to critically evaluate. If we ever see something that has bias in it, we need to do the thumbs down and we need to explain it. And all of the models do look at that information. And that's part of what they use to fine tune the models and improve them. And so I encourage you to do that. Other ways you can mitigate bias is better prompting. You can always ask for diverse perspectives, objective responses, and different viewpoints, and you will get them if you ask for them. You need to evaluate them critically anyway, and we need to train students to develop their critical thinking skills and identify and question biases. We need to teach, practice, model, and repeat. But we also need to be aware of our own biases and make sure that we are not leading the models, because these models want to please you. And if you give them a biased prompt, then they will give you biased responses. And I've seen, unfortunately, examples of educators doing that, using very biased inflammatory language in a prompt to create a lesson that was then shared with students. And this was a college level, a university level, not a high school, not in North Carolina. But we have to make sure that we as the educators are keeping our own biases out of our lessons in any way, and especially with AI, because it is more influential to students. It has more influence on them because they trust technology more. And so it's something that everybody needs to be aware of. Also, over dependence on AI continues to be a discussion, a concern for educators. And I would just say that we've been here before. It is easier to cheat. It's easier to off-put your thinking to AI, but we've been here before. We had to go through the whole debacle with graphing calculators, students being able to do their work on there, students having to show their work, and math teachers had to adapt to that. The whole advent of the internet. We had to teach students how to be critically evaluating the internet, how to not just copy and paste text and claim it as their own, how to paraphrase it, how to cite it. We're going to have to teach students those same skills and more with AI. They need to be trained how to use it with integrity, how to use it responsibly. And so it will also require us to adapt our own thinking about pedagogy and cheating, because it's different now. It just is. Cheating is not something new, though. This is a Stanford study that's been going on for many years. And they found before ChatGPT that 60 to 70% of the students who responded admitted to engaging in cheating behaviors in the last month. They expected in 2023 that number would go up drastically, but it did not. It stayed the same. And so that points out the fact that cheating is a philosophical issue. It is not a technological issue. We've got to think about why students cheat. And unfortunately, sometimes it's because the work does not seem relevant to them. But it's something I go into in depth in my ethics webinar a few weeks back. So I'm not going to spend too much time today because our time is running short. But we've got to make sure that we are not relying on AI detectors as a solution, because they are not a solution. They're not equitable. They're not nearly as accurate as they claim to be. And there are a lot of issues with AI detectors. One of them being that they're discriminatory against non-native English speakers. And in my opinion, they're also discriminatory against students with text disabilities. And that hasn't been proven. I'm hoping somebody's doing that study as well. But a lot of students also can use AI and can get by with it. They know how to cheat the detectors. And this is a study that proves that the techniques that any student can find on TikTok, they can find hundreds of videos to tell them how to beat an AI detector, and pretty much all of them work. Just telling it to write like an average seventh grader, telling it to misspell a couple words, taking the output and rephrasing it a little bit. Any of those things will reduce the accuracy greatly, as this graphic displays. And there is a study there linked if you want to explore that a little more. And that brings us to the ugly parts of AI, which everybody needs to be aware of this year, that there are some ugly parts of AI. And we've already talked about anthropomorphizing a little bit, how human AI is becoming. But this is something really disturbing that we need to be very careful that we're not we're not causing it to be worse, that we're instead being very careful to always draw that distinction between AI and humans. Students need to know what it is and how it works. They need to understand that it is calculating, it's not thinking. And so when we're saying things like, if we're using AI in front of a class and it's taken a minute to complete, we need to be careful we don't say, oh, she's thinking, give her a minute, she's thinking, or she didn't like that. All of those things contribute to that idea that AI is human for students. And some students do think that. One of the main apps that students are using, in fact, for AI is called Character AI. And Character AI lets them engage with conversation with multiple characters that are created by AI. And students are using it for companionship. They're using it for advice about important life events. They're using it to combat loneliness. And all of those are very, very concerning because, of course, AI doesn't have any kind of ethical capabilities. It can emulate it, it can pretend, but it does not have the ability that students think it has. And so we've got to be really careful about that. And this is just an article that really concerned me from the CEO of Replica a couple of weeks ago, where she actually put out a statement saying that it was okay to marry an AI chatbot. And so this is very concerning. The OpenAI's GPT store has all kinds of AI boyfriends and girlfriends and things in it. And so we've got to be able to combat that in schools and make sure we're teaching students differently. Deepfake audio is something else to be concerned with. As we saw earlier with the Congresswoman who was able to clone her own voice for a really good purpose, that same technology is readily available online and very easy to use. And pretty much anyone with just a little snippet of someone else's voice can clone their voice. And this is a video that I'm not going to play, but about an educator, an athletic director who actually did that. He cloned his principal's voice and made it sound like the principal was saying some really racist, vile things. And it caused that principal a lot of reputational damage. It caused him to get death threats, and eventually, it was resolved. But what if somebody really had attacked him during that process before he was able to prove his innocence? Those are things we have to be concerned about. And so that I would encourage you to look at, and that's the adults doing it. So that's something that, of course, our students are going to explore because it's so quick and easy to do online now. Another thing is deepfake videos and audios. Of course, videos, we've already seen some of the potential of the video, but this case was really kind of mind-boggling because this was like a Google Meet call with all kinds of people from the company that appeared to be there in person. And they were engaging with this individual in speech and their movements and everything. And this is somebody that he knew all these people. He had worked with them before, and they told him it was okay to make this 25 million transfer. And it was all a deep fake. Every single one of those individuals was a deep fake video that was engaging in live in real time. And it was just a big scam. And that company lost $25 million from that. And so that's really concerning. And I encourage you to watch that video as well on your own time. This is probably one of the biggest concerns I have in education, though, is that a lot of women and girls across the country and across the world have been victimized by deep fake pornography. The most famous case, of course, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. There were deep fake porn videos of them that went out online and were shared millions of times before they were taken down. But it's happened to girls in high school as well. A very famous case in New Jersey last spring. But I also found out that it happened in a school in North Carolina last year, that some girls were victimized by this. And I'm not going to play this video either, but I do encourage you to watch it and to realize, to think about it as in your own context. But what educators need to know about it is they need to know that it's how easily it is to do. The technology is readily available online, and they need to know that it is very hard these days to distinguish between AI generated video, audio, or images and human generated. And we need to be teaching our students that skill as well. We need to teach them to be critical of everything they see, because unfortunately our kids are going to grow up the remainder of their lives in a world where it's very hard or impossible to distinguish between the two. And that's a sad statement, I know, but it is a true statement. We need to be cautious. We need to teach our kids to be a little more cautious. Some of our kids are real bad oversharers on social media, and they don't have any guardrails about who can see their content. We need to be more careful about that. We need to teach them to be more careful about it. We need to help them understand the ethical implications, the emotional damage that comes from this, and then the legal implications as well of creating and distributing, possessing deepfake content, especially explicit content, and especially if any of those people in those videos are minors. That is something that can be very, very damaging. It can cause them to be labeled as a sex offender and have to register as a sex offender for the rest of their lives. And so that's an important thing our kids need to know about, because kids are, they're foolish, and we don't want them to make a mistake that's going to damage them the rest of their life, as well as causing harm to other innocent individuals. And also, schools need to address cyberbullying in their cyberbullying policies. They need to call out specifically using someone's likeness in image, audio, or video to without their consent, maliciously or not maliciously. Even if they think it's funny, they think it's a joke, there needs to be punishment specifically spelled out for that, and especially for explicit content. I will say there is that, well, first of all, we'll get to that, but education is the best way to mitigate these things. These are bad and ugly things, and they make a lot of people just want to shut the door to AI. But if we in education ignore AI, it's not going to keep these things from happening. It's not going to keep our students from doing them, because our students are glued to TikTok, they're glued to Snapchat, they're glued to Instagram. They're going to know about these things, and they're going to know how to do these things, and they need someone telling them the fallout from them, the social implications, the ethical implications, the legal implications. And that education is the best way to mitigate these things. AI literacy is needed for everyone. I will say that there is a law being passed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what educators can do, this is a free resource that I think every middle school and high schooler should be getting this year. I encourage you in your school to carve out a time, whether it be homeroom, first block, or something, where every single teacher is delivering this lesson to every single student, because this is a fantastic lesson from AI for Education about deepfakes specifically, which dives into all of those things. It explains what they are. It talks about the dangers of them. It has some good discussion questions, and it has some good current relevant examples of this happening. And so I encourage you, if you're in a middle school or a high schooler in a position of authority, to try to get this implemented so that every single student in middle and high school gets this lesson at the beginning of this year. There is some legislation that has passed the Senate unanimously, a bipartisan piece of legislation that is now in the House, that will also give some legal repercussions to using deepfake pornography, because currently, unfortunately, there's not a lot legally that can be done unless the content is a minor. That's different if it's a minor. But there is some this legislation hopefully will be passed soon, and it will give some legal recourse for victims of deepfake pornography. So I encourage you to follow that legislation. The full text of it is linked there as well. But everybody needs to learn about AI. Everybody can and should be learning about AI before they're ready to learn with it, because of a lot of the bad and ugly things that I've shown you, the examples I've shown you. It's important that we get AI literacy in our education communities. It is the best defense, and it includes knowing how to critically understand, use, and evaluate AI, and how to ethically participate in an increasingly digital world. And this breaks it down a little more. For understanding, our students, our teachers, everybody needs to know what it is and what it's not. They need to know how it works, its potential benefits and risk. They need to effectively and responsibly use the tools, and that means they need to have hands-on practice when they get of the correct age so that they can, in using the tools. They need to know how to critically evaluate everything, how to always be that human in the loop and direct the AI to oversee it and evaluate and iterate on it. And they need to ethically participate by building their own AI literacy, using it in line with ethical policies and academic company policies, always being transparent about its use, and being aware of and mitigating bias and inaccuracies. We have in North Carolina a recommended timeline for student AI use, and we do not recommend that elementary students engage with AI chatbots because they are not yet able to really employ the critical thinking that they need to. But we do recommend that in middle school they start engaging with the chatbots in teacher created ways only. They're not old enough in middle school to engage with ChatGPT or to create accounts. Teachers can kind of introduce them by creating chatbots in like School AI and Magic School, if the PSU decides to do that. But in high school, I really feel like all the high school students should be engaging with AI before they graduate. And of course, after having AI literacy and understanding it, and for all the reasons we've already talked about, and that I'm not going to beat that horse anymore about their future and what they need in the future. But that timeline goes into it more, and we have a segment also about AI literacy in one of our webinars that I encourage you to look at that details. And our guidelines have a lot of grade span level content that is free and vetted that we have put out there for teachers and schools to use. But I'm going to leave you with a call to action that you really should be infusing AI literacy in high school classes during this school year, especially because our students are graduating into that world. But even our middle schoolers, as I said, they need at least an awareness of deep fakes and some of the dangers of AI this year. I'm also going to, for those, because we had a mix up with the link yesterday and some people were not able to join who wanted to. I'm also going to share a link that if you have watched this webinar, this is going to be on the honor system. You've watched the webinar through and you want to get a certificate of attendance. I'm going to show you a link that you can use to fill out a feedback form. And that feedback, after you fill it out, it will send you a certificate of attendance showing that you attended if you need to submit that for your own. I'm going to pull it up here and share it now, but this will allow you to submit feedback and get a certificate of attendance. And I'm going to leave that up there for a moment, but it is go.ncdpi.gov/capital A, capital AI underscore capital W webinar underscore capital F feedback. And again, if you've watched the whole webinar and you need a certificate of attendance to submit for CEO credit within your institution, I encourage you to go fill in the feedback. We also do really look at the feedback. We use it for recommendations on further future webinars and how we can improve. So we do appreciate the feedback. Of course, we always appreciate it if the webinar was very helpful to you. We always like to hear that as well. So I encourage you to fill that out. And I'm just going to stay on for another minute or so. Of course, you can pause the video if you're watching this on replay. And I thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in our future webinars.